real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Welcome back, everybody. Nathan with you again. And today we have a return guest with some good updates. We have Brian Sauve, the president of the National Police Federation. And Brian was previously on episode 4, so we won't be getting into his whole bio here. But you can go listen to his story and some other ongoing things with the National Police Federation in that episode. Today, we're going to be talking about use of force, some of the current direction from the federal minister to the RCMP around use of force options, and then just some of the subsequent impact on policing. So, welcome, Brian.
Well, thanks for having me back, Nathan. Always a pleasure to chat with you, and the topics that you cover are fascinating. So I think the audience probably appreciates the breadth and the depth that you go to.
Well, I appreciate the time, but I was telling somebody that just recently, actually, I can kind of see general numbers of where people listen, and for some reason, Alberta is about half the listeners, and then Nova Scotia is the other half. I don't know why. I have no clue.
You didn't grow up there?
No.
No. Okay.
I just get a lot of listeners. There's like a couple hundred a month are from Nova Scotia, and then it's funny. I can even see there's like 3 or 4 people every month from Tanzania. I don't know if they're just listening by accident, but I get people from around the world that kind of listen to this. So it's really cool to see the reach you can get on these things. But I'm glad to help you guys out, so your message will kind of get out there. And obviously, things that impact the RCMP definitely do have an impact on municipal police. A lot of things start with you guys and trickle down to the smaller services. So I think this will be a good discussion.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons we've been so, I wouldn't say it's actually been so public, but we've been so thorough in this particular issue, because obviously for your listeners who aren't aware, the Prime Minister issued a new mandate letter to the Minister of Public Safety earlier this year in the month of May. And that may or may not be political, seeing as it was around the anniversary of the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protests. That mandate letter talked about prohibiting the use of neck restraints or chokeholds, as well as eliminating the use of tear gas and rubber bullets in the RCMP. So then it filters down. The Minister of Public Safety then issues a new mandate letter to the Commissioner talking about those same 3 things, which I think should be concerning for police in general in Canada. Mainly because obviously from the RCMP's perspective, we can divide that into 2 sections, and every member of the RCMP on our incident management intervention model or our use of force framework gets trained and is the carotid control technique is a use of force on the continuum that they can use when fearing death or grievous bodily harm. So to pull that out of every member's use of force framework, and we're a very diverse police service now. Mm-hmm. So we have 5'0" members going into bar fights with those who are 6'2" or 6'4". That CCT or carotid control technique is actually a very effective balancing tool mm-hmm. for those that might be mismatched. Not so much as probably impactful for a municipal police service, and I'm not sure if Edmonton. I know Winnipeg doesn't use the CCT in their use of force framework. Maybe probably because they are more dense in their population to police officer. You push the red button and there could be 5 cops there in 2 minutes or less. Mm-hmm. For us, a member working in Fort Chipewyan or La Ronge or some of those less populated places, its backup could be 4 to 6 minutes to even a half hour to an hour away. And as you know, 4 minutes in a fight is a lifetime. So that's our concern with the carotid control technique, because, in smaller places, are we going to place a member who's in that fight for their life in a situation where they're going to possibly draw a sidearm because they feel they have no other option? And now it's a fight for a gun.
Well, yeah.
And so...
You know what? One of the things, and just going back to one of your earlier points here about it being political, I would very much be of the opinion that this is all about politics, because the terminology used by the politicians right from the top is never correct. And this is the same in the gun debate, assault style rifles or weapons. That's not even a real term. And it's just comes across as being lazy, but also you're trying to drum up like a certain image in people's heads of what's actually the threat is, what's actually going on out there, calling things chokeholds. Like, it's not two hands around somebody's throat and just choking them, like cutting off their air. There is an actual technique. I've seen it applied dozens of times in training. Having done martial arts, I know it's an effective tool. And there's a million studies on it too that say it's effective. It doesn't damage people. But yeah, and like you were just saying, we have a diverse service. You need to teach people a lot of different ways to take care of themselves and to take care of the public. So to take away intervention options or techniques, this can be put people in a very dangerous place.
And I agree with you. It is. I try not to be political, but we can point that out, that these mandate letters were announced shortly before or shortly after a certain anniversary in May. So I think, yes, the inaccuracies of the statement is trying to bolster support for different political parties and all that great stuff. But, there's no election this year, too. So it could just be, a misunderstanding or a media or a soundbite from a parliamentarian that wants to get some traction, which is fine. I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And we've clearly, we sent our position paper as well as the background videos and the documents to the minister, the prime minister's office and such. And it clearly explains to them, hey, chokehold, we don't use that. Neck restraint, we don't use that. What we do use is a vascular control technique, which is commonly called the carotid control technique. And by the way, here's all the scientific documents and research, one just recently completed this year, where the RCMP and a number of U.S. law enforcement agencies studied it through in-field application as well as training application. There were almost 1,000 applications of the CCT in those environments, and less than 0.5% reported any significant injury. So it is a very safe, medically proven technique when applied properly, obviously, and keeping your members up to date on their training in that technique as to how to apply it properly. The last 25 to 30 years, actually, you'd almost say since the evolution of policing, the public has asked for us to be able to do it safer, right? Without resorting to lethal force. So you end up with, in today's modern age of policing, obviously the CEW, conducted energy weapon, OC spray, the baton, and even probably in my lifetime, you've seen the duty belt go from a pistol and revolver cartridges to now the pistol and magazines and the baton and the OC spray and the CEW and because we've been moving to options away from lethal force and fisticuffs.
Yeah.
Because, fights are bloody and fights are ugly. Police officers get hurt. members of the public that we're trying to arrest get hurt. And, with all the contagions out there, I think we want to keep our members safe. We want to keep the public safe. So you don't want to resort to that physical, real close quarters interaction. And how can we spread that time and distance? So hence why you get to the discussion on tear gas and the discussion on sponge tip rounds, or as the PMO or Prime Minister was terming it, rubber bullets, which we don't use. The RCMP doesn't use rubber bullets. What we do use are 40 millimeter extended range impact weapons, sponge tip rounds.
But bullet sounds better.
Bullet sounds better. Bullet sounds more violent for sure.
Yeah.
And really, okay, you can call them a sponge tip bullet, but it's not a rubber bullet, right? A rubber bullet is a different weapon. It's a different specialty munition. It is commonly used in the States, and they will kill and they will impact and break the skin. Whereas the sponge tip round, the big 40 millimeter, is designed not to, based on the training and how it's applied and all that great stuff. They're fairly large. So correcting that verbiage and providing, subject matter expertise. Like I think we had one of our emergency response team members do a video. We had one of our trainers at Chilliwack at the Pacific Region Training Center explain the carotid control technique and demonstrate it in a video, as well as explain where it became useful for her in a specific circumstance where it was the only option available to it. And then obviously tear gas, again, something to explain to the politicians is that tear gas in Canada is never used on a lawful or peaceful assembly. It's just not. And it is a very controlled specialty munition. In the RCMP, at least in our context, can only be deployed by an incident commander in a riot or an unlawful assembly. And there are very strict parameters upon how they can deploy that. You must give a safe exit route for people to go to. The whole idea is to move a crowd to a certain direction where you can end the unlawful assembly or the riot that is occurring. And the most recent example is the Stanley Cup riots in Vancouver, where it was quite effectively used to move people out of the downtown core and away from certain locations. So I think educating the public, educating our elected officials is hopefully going to have an impact on how they make decisions down the road.
Well, when these letters start coming down, the direction starts coming down, I would imagine maybe one of the first questions is why this change and why now, but also why these three specific intervention methods? Have they ever said why they picked these three of all things?
I don't know, and I think there's a lot of focus on the minority voices speaking up about policing, and perhaps there's greater weight given to certain voices in Canada than those who are the expert voices. If I listen to the cancer patient tell me what they want as treatment versus the actual oncologist's recommendations as to what they should have as treatment, our cancer treatment in Canada might be completely different today because we're listening to the patient who thinks that one thing is best for them versus the scientists that can back up what they're recommending as far as the best treatment. And I think that's a little bit of where we are in public policy debate is minority voices should have a say in everything that we do, but should it be the guiding say?
Well, and the person that's having that conversation with them, instead of looking at it from maybe political motivations, says, okay, I get what you're saying and you want this. Here are the stats. Here are the numbers. I've had a few guests on since the last time we talked, but we've talked quite a bit about things like bail reform. And the numbers that never get put out there, it says, this group is dealt with more by police. This group has more, specific group has more use of force against them. But they don't say, I guess on two sides of things, who calls us and what communities do we go to the most. So that's one of the aspects that those stats aren't put out there. And they don't say, like, when these people get released, where do you think they go? They go back to that community. A lot of bad guys that, whether people realize it or not, they go back to mom and dad because they usually don't have another place to go. So they're back in the same community, just reoffending against the exact same people. So obviously those numbers will be high.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
And we've put forth a lot of positions and papers at different government levels, talking about exactly that, so overrepresentation in our prison system or overrepresentation in the policing world for different communities is not so much a policing problem, but really it's a community problem because, if someone is in a provincial institution and they're getting released in a week, what's the plan for vocational training to make them a happy, healthy, productive member of the community to be able to have a job, afford some rent, and actually go to work? Is there a plan? Does the province fund it? Does the community fund it? Do the feds fund it? And, to the same extent, federal corrections, right? What statutory release is, when they're going to be coming out. So what's the plan to keep someone off whatever the addictive substance they may have, to reinsert them into community, all these things take money versus just, out you go, good luck, have a nice day, and then back in tomorrow after robbing a bank. And unfortunately, our marginalized communities are the ones who are overrepresented, mostly because they are overlooked by the social safety network in Canada. And that's where the police respond to time and time again because the system has failed them.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I was kind of wondering, maybe I'm trying to think how to word this, but how much influence or does the minister get direct input in saying, like, the RCMP can use specific type of force or intervention methods? So when he sends the letters down, and I think this is kind of the discussion that's coming up in Nova Scotia, like, how much influence does the federal government have on what the RCMP is doing? Is there enough separation? If they say don't use these intervention options, does the RCMP have to listen? Or are they kind of like, I can take it under advisement, but we see the benefit to these things. The stats say one thing, so we're going to stick with them. Is that possible?
I think it is, and I think this is, you did mention it, with respect to Nova Scotia, with respect to what's happening in the Public Order Emergency Commission. The commissioner, the deputy commissioners, commanding officers across the country in different divisions have clearly said time and time again that even though the commissioner is a deputy minister, it's really clear that the RCMP itself has operational independence from the Government of Canada and public safety. So here we are talking about three operational things and operational decisions. We're actually going through a selection right now for body-worn cameras, which is an operational decision, a new pistol replacement project, which is on the way, again, an operational decision. So they do follow the Government of Canada's procurement processes for those two, but in the end, selection of a vendor, selection of whether it's an, Axon body-worn camera or a Sig Sauer pistol remains with the RCMP. So I've got to think the use of force framework, which is based on subject matter expertise within the RCMP and the global policing community, are all operational decisions. So I would hope that the organization itself would push back and say, well, thank you very much. we don't use chokeholds.
Yeah.
We don't use neck restraints. Tear gas is for riots only, and we don't reuse rubber bullets. So there, we've complied with your mandate letter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, to be honest,
none.
It's like, well, we somehow had the foresight and we already knew you were going to ask this from 30 years ago. So we're done. One of the things that you're talking about, though, with the body worn cameras, and I know this debate comes up here quite a bit. Usually it boils down to a bit of a funding issue, from what I understand. But it looks like the RCMP is going to go ahead with them. And it's one of the articles I was reading said that they're going to be starting in 2022. Do you know where that program is and kind of the extent of it as we speak?
Yeah, I can. I mean, as far as I know, so there's no issue with funding. We managed to, and the RCMP actually managed, we worked together with public safety to advocate for body-worn cameras back in June 2020. And in November 2020, the government allotted, I think, $265 million or whatever it is. But that's initial purchase as well as the first 3 years of data usage and monitoring all across the country. And they're looking at a deployment of, I think, 13 to 15,000 across Canada. The request for proposal went out. There are 2 finalists. I'm not sure who they are right now, and the RCMP is making that selection as to which vendor they're going to go with. Ultimately, the phased deployment is supposed to start in December this year, with Alberta, Nova Scotia, and Nunavut being the first 3 provinces to get them. And then in 2023, the rest of the country would slowly be phased into body-worn cameras.
One of the things I was thinking with those was, I just remember from being with the Mounties, we had the dash cams, and those are from my own experience. I'm sure everybody's got a different story or experience with them, but from my own, I actually liked them, and I had used a ton of video as evidence in court. A lot of it speaks for itself, because when you go to court, I'll say the accused makes up all kinds of stories. And in case people didn't realize, lots of people lie in court, that they can say almost whatever they want and defense says whatever they want. But the video speaks for itself. And one of the things I was kind of thinking was, if you get something on a body-worn camera, and it's always about police accountability, I think these cameras would be a good idea, because they're going to hold the public accountable. But with that being said, if something occurs in a public space, that should be allowed to be put out there, and there's no privacy. It's like, well, you were doing this in a public space, and hundreds, if not thousands of people could have been standing there and seen you acting this way, calling the cops this name, throwing something at the cops, just being a disturbance by yourself. I think that maybe an idea should be, okay, if we're going to have these, this is full, frank, and fair. It's going to be put out there, and your face will be on the news.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get there. Obviously, different legislation covers off the RCMP and release of information. There's obviously Privacy Act concerns, and one of the challenges with respect to body-worn cameras within the RCMP is okay, retention, all that great stuff. You're going to keep the footage for however long. However, if you're going to court with something, that footage then has to be scrubbed, right, for innocent bystanders' faces and all of those things, kids and all that great stuff. So it was a bit of a piece of work and it's still in development, about how much back-end work is actually required for, 13,000 members across the country using cameras, and all of that footage that might be required for some form of disclosure. And then, God forbid, someone doesn't access to information, because then you're creating this entire new unit just to go through video footage. So, but I do agree with you. Police services across Canada can be better with and I hate to say it, it's going to sound bad, but with publicly shaming the naysayers. And it's not about shaming; it's about correcting the record.
Yeah.
The 12-second cell phone clip versus the 55-second body-worn camera clip, right? And responding to the 12-second cell phone clip that shows the worst of an interaction, and actually showing the 55-second body-worn camera clip that gives context and shows the best of the interaction. So I think we globally can do better. It will improve the narrative, I think, around policing and showing that our members, regardless of stripe across the country, do an excellent job day in and day out serving their communities.
Yeah, and in one of the NPF's calls to action here, just going back to the point I just made about holding people accountable for their own actions, you have in here like preliminary evidence in other police jurisdictions in Canada shows that body-worn cameras may alter police actions, but more importantly, civilians may also act less aggressively towards officers when they're aware they are being filmed. Because the camera is always in their hand and pointing at you, but you can't tell which of the 20 voices in the background is the person holding the camera or who's acting what way in the background. So I think some of the stuff that people are asking for, it's like, it's maybe it's a good change or a welcome change, but you got to realize like you're going to be held accountable too. One of the things I did want to get onto was just the training, because you have a section in the letter here as well in the NPF's position, just about training around the use of force in the IM model. So all RCMP officers recertify on the model yearly, if I'm correct?
All RCMP members go through their annual firearms qualification annually, and with that becomes a bit of a refresher on the IM, i.e., de-escalation, stop police, do you pull the trigger or not pull the trigger, as well as your lethal force and grievous bodily harm considerations. The actual IM and the use of force continuum is done in more detail every 3 years with our operational skills training or operational skills maintenance, depending which side of the country you're on, where they go through baton, they go through a C-spray, recertify on CEW, they'll go through physical hand hard, empty hand soft, all of that great stuff, and the carotid control technique and annual firearms qualification also is in there, and IARD as a supplemental, carbine, all of that great stuff is done every 3 years, and they go through the full model.
And I know some of the criticisms of policing in general is they want everybody to do more de-escalation. But when I'm looking at the IM model here, I'm looking at a picture right now, crisis intervention and de-escalation is in every single step.
Yep.
And then there's also verbal and nonverbal communication in every single step. So it's in there. It's built in.
It is built in. And, we've been, from the RCMP members' perspective, we've been blowing this horn a lot over the last 3 to 4 years. The membership of the RCMP, they respond to almost 3 million calls on average per year. And any use of force, so that's me slapping a suspect, that's empty hand soft, all the way up to discharging a firearm, right? Mm-hmm. Death or grievous bodily harm. Any use of force represents 0.1% of those 3 million calls. So that tells me, and I'm biased because I'm a cop and I understand the IM, but that tells me that our members across Canada are pretty damn good at crisis intervention and de-escalation and resolving things peacefully when 99.9% of the calls you go to are resolved that way. Mm-hmm. So can we get it better? Should we strive for 100%? Yes, we should. And should governments across the country look at improving verbal de-escalation and negotiation and skills for their police officers on the front line, yeah, I think that's fantastic. But should that come at the expense of taking away other options that might be needed, which could put the public or the member themselves at risk? I think that should be a hard no.
Well, and even the number of, that 0.1%, how many of those people are repeat offenders? So even if I have 4,000 uses of force in a year, maybe 2,000 of those are with the same person. So it's actually not 4,000 individual citizens. So it's an even smaller number than that.
It is, and I think most police officers off the country, or across the country, will know if you're going to deal with person X and you dealt with person X twice last week, and you're dealing with them for the third time this week, and person X might be a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we might be getting into a scrap. I'm going to be thinking about how I'm going to do this, and there might be some use of force. So yeah, you might be dealing with the same person 10 times in a year and having some kind of a use of force incident. So yeah, that number might be even smaller. Maybe it's I don't know, 90/100th of 1%.
Yeah,
I don't know how you shrink that number even smaller. Like 0.1% over 3 million calls to me is a pretty damn impressive number. Is it 99.98? And we're really even close to 100% of in the individual use of force incidents. But I think broadly speaking, police in Canada do a fantastic job de-escalating and resolving incidents without incident. And it's unfortunate that different politicians and different governments seem to capitalize or try to capitalize on that 1/10.
Well, and it always seems like there's we're shooting for this zero, like it's the utopian idea, and it's unrealistic. We're dealing with people, and people make bad decisions. People make stupid decisions. There are all kinds of things going on in every individual's life that is going to affect them on the day-to-day. And it's sometimes people break and do something that's against the law or just not accepted by society. Then it's to a point where a police officer has to deal with them. So I think some of the rhetoric when it's like, one is too many. Well, that's an unrealistic statement. So we have to deal with facts and truth and what actually occurs out there. It would just be nice to see some more truth around things is kind of where I'm getting to.
Yeah, I think most police officers would agree with you. I would agree with you. Obviously, cops have sworn an oath and they like to be treated fairly and honestly. And I think with the politicization of policing across different jurisdictions in Canada, whether it's from a municipality's move to defund or this particular mandate letter issue about less lethal intervention options, I think it's disheartening to cops to sit back and say, you're an MLA, you're an MP, maybe come out for a ride along and see what life is really like, and then have an informed opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting in Europe. Obviously, they just released a survey, and I have to finish reading it. But about yesterday, Eurocop, which is an association that represents a whole bunch of European police officers, released a poll that almost 85% of their members support a rearming initiative for police officers across Europe, just because of the challenges they are seeing with, knives and the bad guys
mm-hmm.
having access to firearms and, terrorist activities and the fears that those members are placed in. So it's fascinating that across the pond, they're actually looking at increasing lethal use of force options. And over here, we're looking at eliminating less lethal, which could probably lead to an increase in the use of lethal.
Well, and to be completely honest, the bad guys know what they can get away with. They know what tools we carry, and they know our tactics. They get disclosure. So when they know they can do all these things that kind of fall in the middle of the use of force options, they know, well, if I start complying at this point, this person's not going to be allowed to do this to me. So the whole thing gets kind of weaponized against us. So yeah, I mean, the more tools, the better. I think it's at a point where like I can't even fit all the options on my duty belt. Like unless you got like a 60-inch waist, you can't fit most of the tools on there now. But the more options, the better. And I think one of the things with the rebuttal that you guys have put together that I've been reading is it's nice to see a bit of an offensive strategy, because especially over the last couple of years, we, to a degree, I think it was being held accountable. But now I think it's to a point where police are just getting attacked. You certainly see it in the US. It's not as, I'll say, violent toward cops up here, but it is getting to that point. There are more uses of force, more assaults against police. We just don't get shot at as much, but we do. But we get it from all levels, right? We get it from the public. We get it from the politicians. We get it from all the special interest groups. We get it from the media. So it's at what point is it no longer being held accountable, and instead we're just being attacked for doing a job that we were hired to do to protect these very people? It's such a weird situation to kind of be in the middle of.
I agree with you, and I think over the past number of decades, I don't think police associations or police leadership of any stripe have done a very good job explaining the challenges policing face, explaining the assaults on police officers, advertising the community engagement that our cops do on a day-to-day basis, advertising use of force and explaining what it means. Really getting the community involved to support police in Canada, because we have kind of let it slide to a point where Canadians are heavily influenced by U.S. media.
Yeah,
you see. I mean, it was news yesterday about the tragedy in Los Angeles about their sheriff's cadets out on a run. Should something similar happen in Canada, is that going to be news in LA? Most probably not. It might filter down, but it wouldn't be headline news, right? So that stuff, the school shootings that happen in the States, they're headline news on CBC, CTV, Global. There was a lockdown the other day in Gatineau, Quebec, with a kid with a gun. Did that make its way down to Messina, New York as headline news? Probably not. So we're heavily influenced by U.S. media.
Yeah.
And I think what they see is that movement about cops being bad because, and it filters up. So in order to go, as you mentioned, more on the offensive, I don't think it's an offensive. I think it's more we need to bring the reasonable Canadian back to ground, because there is widespread support for policing in Canada. It's actually on the rise and has been since 2020. So it's really just saying, hey, you know what? We're people too. We signed up to serve. This is some of the stuff we do. There's lots of oversight. There's lots of civilian oversight. We could get charged criminally if we have a bad day. That's the reason we have these authorities in the criminal code, Section 25, et cetera, to use force. And we use it very, very sparingly because we're very, very good in Canada at talking people out of forcing us to use force. So I think there's valid points there, and there's valid discussions there, and I think the debate today really is forcing police leadership and police associations to get better at how they publicly defend their members or defend their service or talk about the future and the initiatives that are going to be underway.
Well, that's part of the reason why we got the podcast. So we're trying to get more people on to talk about all kinds of things, and get people to have the critical conversations. It's not just about the 2-line Twitter headline and screaming and shouting. So, yeah. Is there anything you think we missed on this topic? Is there anything else maybe we should cover?
Well, no, and honestly, I don't know when anything is going to materialize about this less lethal intervention options thing. We heard about it in May. It took us a while to do some research and obviously do the videos and get some stats and stuff. So we didn't release our final version until November, first week of November.
Mm-hmm.
The RCMP has a copy. We've sent it to the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, sent it to the Canadian Police Association. Hopefully all different chiefs and all different associations will, either come out and support in whole, in part, or similarly, or just ignore it. That's fine if it's not an issue for them. And really, hopefully everybody can get on the similar perspective. So I don't know if there's going to be compliance to that, but the fear obviously is if it happens with the RCMP, it's not long before the OPP will follow suit, and then the Sûreté de Quebec, and then ultimately what happens in Toronto will filter out to the rest of the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the worry.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll have to see and hope, keep putting up the good fight and helping out. You guys definitely have, I would say, a lot more resources than a lot of the local associations when it comes to doing some of this research and finding out those stats. I think that's one thing we're not the greatest at, is keeping stats, at least a whole wraparound of, a situation. We kind of just collect, hey, this use of force was used, and we don't look at, well, how many times have we dealt with the person who called us? Why are we here? What were the behaviors of the person being dealt with that dictated that response? So, we appreciate all the effort you're putting in.
Yeah, we're getting there, and obviously, hopefully I'll get a chance to see Mike again before the end of the year. I haven't seen him in a couple of years, so say hi to him for me.
Will do.
And that's part of the idea is, we want to work in partnership with the CPA and other associations, and ultimately, have that united front to improve the lives of all costs in Canada. So
great. Well, if you could just hang on the line a second, and I'll
sure.
just stop the recording.